Gamecocks, and welcome back to Gamecock Game Day.
This week, Gamecocks women's basketball falls to number 6 on the polls, but rise above Arkansas and Vanderbilt. A new guest joins us on Around the Horseshoe to discuss Gamecock basketball and baseball, but first, men's basketball finally shoots and scores on their first conference win of the season, before once again falling victim to old habits.
All that and more coming up. Welcome to Gamecock Game Day.
Thanks for sticking with us, Gamecocks. I'm Zander Collins.
And I'm Austin McConnell. Gamecock men's basketball finally found some success last Saturday with an 84-69 win over Texas. The victory puts an end to their 13-game losing streak and marks both their first conference win of the season and their first win overall in 2025. The Gamecocks banked 34 free throws, the most of the Lamont Paris era. Though the win was uncharacteristic for South Carolina, the performance of Gamecocks standout Colin Murray Boyles was all too familiar.
Murray Boyles led the Gamecocks throughout the entirety of the game until he fouled out with just under 4 minutes and 30 seconds left. The sophomore forward recorded 8 of South Carolina's first 10 points and rounded off his time in the game with 22 points and 10 rebounds. The double-double is his 8th of the season, a career high for Murray Boyles. Despite the win, the Gamecocks returned to their old ways against Missouri with a stout 71-101 loss to the Missouri Tigers.
The story was all too familiar, with the Gamecocks losing control midway through the first half and failing to recover, despite best efforts from sophomore Colin Murray Boyles. Murray Boyles led both teams with a whopping 27 points and a 90.9 shooting percentage. Jamari Thomas attempted to contribute to Murray Boyles' effort with 17 points, but it wasn't good enough, with the Gamecock bench rendered unable to secure a bucket until just under 7 minutes and 30 seconds left in the game. In Lamont Paris's post-game interview, he contributed the loss to the difficulty of playing on the road in the SEC, coupled with Missouri's ability to perform. Well, in the wise words of Kevin Garnett, we did it! Finally got a win. A sigh of relief can be exhaled for a couple days at least. We didn't lay an egg in the conference win column. It was a feel-good win. Glad it was in Columbia. Glad we got one at home. We've been knocking on the door for so long. I'm finally glad we got one.
Knocking on the door. I don't know about that.
What do you mean?
Whatever. But yeah, ends the 13-game losing streak. First win of 2025. First win in 54 days, if you were counting, which I was. But yeah, a great performance by the team, which is something we haven't seen all season. Players like Morris Ugasuk and Zachary Davis, who I've been very critical of in recent weeks, both performed and contributed in this game. 10 points for Ugasuk and 12 points for Zachary Davis, who was perfect from the field. So, not to mention, it felt like a perfect storm of all the things that had been going wrong for the Gamecocks going right. 34 free throws. Jamari Thomas had 13 free throws to finish with 15 points, so they had been struggling all season from the charity stripe, and this was finally a performance in which they felt competent from the line.
Absolutely, and on paper, the two teams, it was a pretty close game. Free throws were the deciding factor. Both teams shot around 40% from the field, 30% from three, and both teams racked up 35 rebounds each. So Trey Johnson had a great game for the Longhorns, but aside from him, no one could really get into a groove and find a way to beat us on the Longhorns side of the ball. So glad we were able to shut them down, and that charity stripe, like you mentioned, really came in clutch for the Gamecocks.
Yeah, Trey Johnson, who was someone I talked about last week as being the potential destroyer of the Gamecocks. I mean, he still had an amazing game. He's been averaging 25 over his last 5 games, which is incredible. And you look at even some mock drafts, most recent one I saw him going 6th. So he's an incredible player. And luckily the Gamecocks were able to stop other players from contributing. You can only do so much to stop Trey Johnson. But yeah, I mean, it was a great game from Johnson, but not enough to beat the Gamecocks, which feels weird to say.
I know.
But yeah.
But we'll take it. We'll take a good win. However, we're back to square one with
going
Missouri.
to the other Columbia now.
Yeah. You know, wanted to get one back against Josh Gray. Loved the guy, but wanted to show him what he was missing out on, and we didn't. So
I'm not sure he's missing much.
We shot 8.7% from 3. We went 2 for 23 from beyond the arc. That's That's not good.
I
The only
could do that.
buckets were from Zachary Davis and Jamari Thomas.
I could do that.
Yeah, you give me 23 chances, I'm making at least 2.
At least 3.
Maybe.
I'm shooting probably 10%, which is more than
Still not
8,
great.
but it's still more than 8.7.
Correct, yeah. That's not our job, that's theirs. So.
No, and completely embarrassing display from the Gamecocks. The most points they've given up all season. And I do want to give some credit to Jamari Thomas, who we said a lot of times this year that it's really a Colin Murray-Boyle show, but he's consistently putting up double digits in these games, even if it's to no avail. So I do want to give some credit to him. 15 turnovers tells a story a lot.
Yeah.
Even if it's a 30-point deficit, that's going to go a long way. And the win streak of 1 lasted just 3 days. 3 days. So.
Well, it was a fun 3 days over a very storied program in Texas. But yeah, Missouri is a really good team. I mean, they'll be a top 5, top 4 seed in the tournament. Not only the SEC tournament, but also the NCAA tournament coming up in just under a month now, I believe. So just couldn't get on a roll against them. You know, you mentioned those 15 turnovers. 1 basket for every turnover, that's 30 points, and that's just about how we lost. So yeah, Missouri's a really good team and short-lived win streak.
Yeah, they didn't struggle at all from behind the arc. 63.5 field goal percentage, 58 3-point, and 83 from free throw. You know, there's a lot of talk, especially now getting into bracketology and March coming up. A lot of the times people say it's a race to 68 to like the 70 range, and that's usually who wins the basketball games first to get to that. Missouri got to that with about 13 minutes left in the second half, so you know, that's rough. But I mean, Caleb Grill, who I also spoke about last week, was able to put up 22 off the bench. So, I mean, Missouri's just a stacked team. So 30 points is still a stretch. I expected it to be a little bit more close than 30, but I didn't have a lot of hope going into this one, and we definitely saw why after that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, number 14 team in the country. It's hard to go on the road in the SEC already, but playing number 14 just adds to the challenge. But traveling over to the other side of the court, despite falling to the 6th spot in the national rankings, Gamecock women's basketball is back to dominating the court with a pair of blowout victories.
Last Thursday, the Gamecocks rebounded from their upset loss to UConn with a 95-55 win over Arkansas. Joyce Edwards led South Carolina in scoring for her 3rd game in a row with 18 points off the bench. Malaysia Fulwiley racked up 15 points, also off the bench, marking her 7th consecutive game with double digits. Bree Hall was not far behind with a season-high 14 points, and Chloe Kitts grabbed her 6th double-double of the season with 10 points and a team-high 13 rebounds.
The Gamecocks kept the momentum following into Sunday's game against the Commodores. Fulwiley and Edwards again led the Gamecocks to victory, with Fulwiley posting 24 points and Edwards boasting her 3rd double-double of the season with 17 points and 12 rebounds. Thanks to their outstanding performances this past week, Fulwiley and Edwards were able to add some more weekly honors to their resumes. Fulwiley was named USBWA Player of the Week, and Edwards pocketed her 4th SEC Freshman of the Week.
11 out of the 12 Gamecocks to grace the hardwood against the Commodores also got in on the fun, scoring at least 1 bucket. In another dramatic display of depth, the South Carolina bench outscored Vanderbilt's roster 56-54. The Gamecocks also outscored the Commodores both in the paint 48-16 and in fast break points 19-0.
Well, 48-16 is a really good number to see after we've been talking about how they get dominated in the paint in some of these games. So it's really good to see them flip that narrative against Vanderbilt.
Stat for you there.
Okay.
Out of all the players listed on Arkansas's roster of being a forward or a center, we held those players to 12 points collectively, which is usually a stat line for
awesome.
just one of the team's best forwards.
Yeah.
So a great bounce back win. 40-point win. I will never shake my head at that.
Yeah.
Arkansas might be the bottom of the SEC, but it's still good to beat the teams in front of you and beat them handily like we did on Thursday. A note that I have here, Joyce Edwards is nice, man. Joyce Edwards is such a talent. And for her to have such an impact off the bench, as well as Malaysia Fulwiley, that's like almost unheard of for your bench to outscore the whole of the entire team that you're facing.
You don't see that often, no. I'm glad you brought up Joyce Edwards because I have my notes for Fulwiley. She's a superstar, man. Even coming off the bench, like she's just racking up points left and right. She's so quick on the court. She plays like a young Steph Curry almost, like just flies around and does her thing. They took care of Arkansas without a doubt. Jumped on them early, never looked back. That's what I want to see back in this Dawn Staley basketball team. That's what they're good at. Just punch them in the mouth early, get out of that first quarter, and just keep adding on to their lead. Still didn't really shoot as well as I hoped. 37 of 82 from the field and 8 from 18 from deep. So still put up 90, so I'm not complaining too much, but 82 shots and you only get 37 to fall. That's a hefty number, I think.
Well, you mentioned the big play, Austin, and how they've had struggles with that this season. Another thing that they've been struggling with is rebounding.
Yeah.
That was not a problem in this game or in the game against Vanderbilt, which is good to see some consistency build on the boards. 57-28 with 23 offensive rebounds for the Gamecocks against Arkansas. And building on that and continuing to show consistency, they did so again against Vanderbilt, 47-35. And speaking of consistency, Mylasia Fulwiley continuing to prove why she's one of the best two-way players in the country. I mean, she's just a complete package.
Absolutely, and we talked about it in Around the Horseshoe last week, how we weren't panicking yet, but we were a little worried about the big play. It's really good to see them turn that around and right before March figure out how to get more points in the paint, get more rebounds, and do all that. So I'm really glad that Dawn Staley has figured that out. Same story against Vandy. Took control early, had a big fourth quarter. For Wiley, I mentioned. They shot a little bit better that game, so I'm not going to complain as much as in the Vandy game. They shot just under 50%, 5 of 19 from 3. So just a little minor tweaks that I think they can fix, but I'm glad they're working on the bigger problems, which are those paint issues.
And, I mean, someone who doesn't have paint issues, Joyce Edwards, going back to her performance against Vanderbilt, 17 points, 12 rebound, double-double, but also recording 5 stocks, which is steals and blocks together. I think it was 2 steals, 3 blocks, something like that. Just incredible. I have in my notes that she's not only the future of South Carolina basketball, she's the future of women's basketball. She is just an incredible player. To lead a team of this caliber in points per game as a freshman off the bench is completely unheard of. And I'm just continued to be impressed, or I'm continually impressed by Joyce Edwards and her development.
Absolutely. Coming up after the break, Zander and I will join this week's guest for a trip around the Horseshoe. Stay with us.
I'm here at Williams-Brice Stadium.
I'm here at Stone Stadium.
I'm here at the Carolina Volleyball Center.
I'm here at Blatt Aquatic Center.
Let's check out some of the highlights.
Welcome to Simply Sports, the show where we simplify the rules of sports so you can enjoy the game.
Get ready to meet the cast of Carolina Tonight. He's the above-average letterbox patron. It's Jamie Bass. She would rather be anywhere else. It's Chloe Brown. They come in to find no one at the surprise party. It's Harry Burgess. His OnlyFans is mostly clips from him on the show. It's Samuel Kander. She's been caught red-handed. It's Ishveen Gujral. He's slaying the house down. It's Will Gunter. She wants something that she wants. It's Liv Moody. He got kicked out of Harvard for anger issues. It's James Nolan. He completely blew this take. It's Tyler Perrone. He's verbally berating the customer service line. It's Billy Petty. He's wittily gwittying onto the stage. It's Jacob Perdue. She's here to tell you, beat it, nerd. It's Fiona Schreier. Often mistaken for someone more famous, it's Camden Speck. He can't find his locker on the first day. It's Asher Thompson. The person in the audition they didn't tell you about is Olivia Wamai. He procrastinated editing this video. It's Jonathan E. Come watch Carolina Tonight in Russell Underground.
Confirmation hearing for the first African-American woman to be nominated for the Supreme Court is underway.
As strikes continue across the nation, how USC campus workers are coming together.
And later, our women's basketball team starts their journey in the NCAA tournament tomorrow.
I'll have the weather forecast for this week and more for you tonight on SGTV Student News at 7.
Campus, local, and national news. Run by students, for students. Student News at 7.
Coming up on Around the Horseshoe. Gamecock Baseball is undefeated, but some games have been a little too close for comfort. Our panel discusses their biggest concerns thus far. Women's basketball bounces back after their third loss of the season. How far will this momentum take them as we head into the postseason? And men's basketball finally breaks their SEC win streak. We'll discuss where men's basketball needs to go from here and beyond. Welcome to another week of Around the Horseshoe. I'm your host, Ryan Stinson, and let's introduce our panel this week. Of course, Gamecock Gameday's very own Zander Collins and Austin McConnell. Our guest this week is SGTV lead sports reporter George Bagwell. Welcome in, George.
Thank you, Ryan.
Excited to be here? Ready? Prepared?
Absolutely. I've been prepared since like 2023.
Oh, yeah?
Oh, let's
Yes,
go.
sir.
You got it all.
So you've been waiting for this moment for a few years now, then?
Oh, yeah. It's been on my calendar. It's been circled.
Oh, yeah. All right. Well, let's not keep you delayed any further. Let's get right into it. Let's go around the horseshoe. We begin this week at Founders Park. Gamecock Baseball has had a strong start thus far under the leadership of first-year head coach Paul Maneri. They are currently 9-0 after series wins against Sacred Heart and Milwaukee, alongside midweek wins versus Winthrop, Queens, and Gardner-Webb. At the plate, of course, junior Ethan Petrie leads the Gamecocks with a .444 average and 2 home runs. Junior Nathan Hall is the only other Gamecock starter with an average over 400 at .423, with Jace Woida, Nolan Naraki, and Dalton Mashore batting over 300 as major contributors. On the mound, senior lefty Matthew Becker leads SC with a 1.59 ERA and 2-0 record in his 2 starts and 11 1/3 innings pitching for the Gamecocks. Brandon Stone also has a 1.42 ERA and 1-0 record in 6 1/3 innings. Despite the Gamecocks taking care of business, they've had some close results thus far. On opening day, they beat Sacred Heart by 2 runs, and they had another 2-run win on the road against Winthrop. While some may say this is how baseball is, others may have some concerns about staying close with teams that South Carolina are meant to beat pretty handedly. The first major test for SC comes this weekend in their series against Clemson, with one game both home and away alongside a Saturday matchup in Greenville. So ahead of this matchup, what are the biggest concerns for Gamecock baseball as they move further into the season? George, let's start with you.
I think, and it's in the name, baseball. You gotta get on base to win the games. This is a team that's top 5 WHIP, top 12 ERA. Pitchers, they're showing out. They're showing out. But they're outside the top 50 in home runs. They're outside the top 50 in slugging percentage. Playing against low D1 caliber teams. If you can't get on base, how are you gonna win the game? If you can't get on base against Milwaukee, how are you gonna get on base against Clemson? That's a good question. I asked it. I don't even have notes. I'm sitting here, I'm looking at the sequoias. But I know that they need to hit. Baseball.
Baseball. No, I think that's a really good point, George, because a lot of viewers at home, they might not know the point of baseball. So, but yeah, I mean, I've gone in a more positive, on a more positive route this week for baseball. I mean, you mentioned their close wins, Ryan, and by definition, that is still a win. A win is a win. And something we talked about last week with softball is that they were finding ways to win, and I think that's the same thing with the baseball team. You mentioned close wins, and I've kind of described those as wins in which we only win by 2 to 3, so I'll list those out. 1 against Sacred Heart, one against Winthrop, 2 against Milwaukee, but in those games combined, only 2 errors. So I think that as the season goes on, they will obviously be getting better, but also they played Clemson pretty close last season. I know we're missing a couple big players, but like we mentioned in one of the first couple weeks, we've been replacing those players with competent players. So I think that all you can really do is win, and I think it's harsh to, talk about the quality of win, especially early in the season.
Yeah, George, I like what you said. Like, you got to get on base. Beautiful quiz, by the way. But only 3 out of their 9 games, they have scored more than 10 runs. I know it's not all about scoring runs, but getting on base, you'll knock in these runs, and you get those insurance. So, and I like what you said, Zander. We don't have many errors, but when we do start committing those errors, you want that cushion of a lead so that whenever you make them, you don't have to panic right away, and then you're swinging at everything, trying to just claw back in the game. So Clemson has seen tougher opponents than we have. Got to come at them quick and take control early. They're ranked number 13. It's in Clemson for game 1 this series. So if we can go on the road in Clemson in a rivalry, rowdy environment, that could help us take control of the series and better our chances of winning it.
Yeah, well, first of all, George, really impressive stuff just to be, sitting looking at a picture of trees and just have all that off the
It's not a picture, it's dynamic.
It is dynamic.
It's moving.
We got some animation involved.
Yeah. It kind of loops. It's like, it's there, and then it's not.
I gotcha.
Yeah.
I gotcha. But I love how you said, it's in the name of the game, and we have to improve our offense. I think, you mentioned on the mound, we're doing very good so far. I mean, I mentioned our top 2 pitchers both having, barely over a 1 ERA. We're in a very good spot on the mound, and I think that's something that Pulmonary has, really provided with his time thus far in the Gamecocks. Is a lot of good pitching depth. But I agree, we're not necessarily at the point where on the plate we should be having as enough success as we should be against these teams. And if we're not having the success now, how are we going to have this success against Clemson? And how are we going to have this success in the SEC? So Zander, you mentioned, the kind of finding ways to win games. We're at the point right now where we shouldn't necessarily be finding ways to win against teams like Milwaukee or against Sacred Heart. I would get that if we're playing, tough opponents like LSU or Florida in our SEC schedule, or even Clemson earlier on in the season, but we're not playing those teams right now. We're playing teams where, like the Gardner-Webb result last night, we should be beating them by a solid margin of runs. Maybe not 10 runs every time, but, a solid enough margin. So with that, I'm going to give Austin the 2 points for this round. Just because, it's important to really provide that offensive cushion, as you said, especially against these tougher opponents who have already figured out their offense like Clemson has. And then, George, you're going to get the 1 point for this, just because, it's become a much more offensive game college baseball has, I think, compared to something like the MLB. And so if you don't have a good offense in such a tough league and taking on these tough opponents like Clemson, it's going to be very, very difficult to find success. So 2 points for Austin, 1 point for George. Move on to our next topic.
Baseball joke.
Yeah, baseball.
After their 3rd loss of the season to UConn, South Carolina women's basketball looked to bounce back in a big way. That seems to be the case this week after 2 big SEC wins. They beat the Arkansas Razorbacks by 40 last Thursday with a 95-55 final score. Then they went on the road to take on Vanderbilt, where they won 82-54. They seem to have gained back some momentum heading into the final week of the regular season. They'll have one final road battle on Thursday as they take on Ole Miss before ending their season with another ranked matchup against Kentucky. For the SEC tournament, they are currently tied with Texas in terms of the top seed in the SEC. Now, this is a weird situation due to their split series, and the seeding between 1 and 2, between Texas and South Carolina, is going to be decided by a coin flip, as long as both teams continue out.
I got heads.
Win out the rest of the season. No other differential, which I find a little bit odd, but those are the rules in the SEC. Nationally, the Gamecocks are still projected to finish as a 1 seed after the top-ranked Notre Dame Fighting Irish fell to NC State last week. So with the Gamecocks seeming to be back on track, how valuable are these big wins to build their momentum, and how far can that momentum take them heading into the postseason? Austin, we'll start with you.
Well, Ryan, that's a really cool tidbit of information. I had no idea it was going to be decided by a coin flip.
I found that out this weekend, and I was stunned, honestly, that there's no other stat that they take in, like, you know, opponent wins, loss, or point differential or anything. Just a coin flip.
Interesting. Yeah, that I never would have known that had you not told me so. Thank you for, you learn something new every day. But very valuable. It's very valuable for them to get this. It's it allows them to find their identity. I think momentum is a real thing, and it does not matter what sport you're watching. If you get hot at the right time, good things will happen. Men's basketball did that last year. This women's team is much more talented than our men's team last year, obviously. But we saw it. You get one big win, you go on a run, you get hot, you get momentum. All of a sudden, you're a 6 seed in the tournament. Obviously, we're going to be a 1 seed or a 2 seed at the worst. But when you have a chance to find your identity in these late regular season games, that's going to help you out in postseason play. And Zander and I talked about it in our first segment, how, you know, they fixed some of their big issues. You know, they still have a few minor tweaks to make before they can call it a championship run. But I mean, they're looking good right now, and I think it's very valuable that they've got these big wins.
Austin, I agree with you. I feel like momentum is something you can't really quantify. It's a vibe. It's a necessity. It's something you need if you're going to win 6 games in a row in March and April against the best teams in the country. But unlike vibes, momentum is built on numbers itself. Okay. You come in with a win. You come in with a win in the SEC tournament, just like last year. That's going to build something in these people's heads, in these players' heads. So much of the game is mental. I know that because every time I shoot a 3, I miss. It's horrible. It's because I'm not in that mental shape. But you come in with these wins under your belt. I think that's what's important. Getting these college kids, you know, just like us, the mental fortitude to win these games in March, just like last year. That's what I think.
Yeah, no, I said some similar things to you guys. I think that any momentum is really good. And like we mentioned in that first segment, they're starting to become consistent with the things that saw them lose these games to UCLA, Texas, and UConn. They're rebounding a lot better. They're showing a lot more effort on defense just because it's the end of the season and these games mean everything because building momentum is everything in college basketball, especially when you go into tournament season. When you saw a team last year like NC State in men's basketball who was by no means on anybody's radar to make any sort of run. They barely even made it into the ACC tournament, excuse me. They were able to win that out and ride that all the way to the Final Four. So, I mean, luckily our team is not a team that needs to rely on a lucky run like that. But even if you just look at some of our top performers over the last 2 games, specifically Joyce Edwards and Mylasia Fulwiley, they're averaging 17.5 and 19.5 over the last 2 games since the UConn loss. So not a bad time for them to start heating up. And all you can really ask is that they win. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the talks about, you know, we mentioned last week that in order to get back on track, this team needs to focus on the issues. And that's been, you know, transitioning from the identities they've had in the past, which was big play and, you know, very up-in-your-face defense, to now we're more of a shooting team. We're a little bit of a smaller team nationally. And, you know, focusing on having a defense that works for this team and having just a system in general that works for this team. And I think we've seen in the last 2 games where it's still very tough SEC opponents, and they've seemed to really take care of business and handle those opponents. So it's a clear sign that Dawn Staley and the team has gone in and looked at the issues and has, you know, taken control of the situation. So Zander, that's going to get you 2 points for this because you just mentioned the consistency of finding the issues, getting them fixed in these last 2 games. And then Austin, I'm going to give you the 1 for this because, you know, it's momentum is a very real thing in this tournament. We've seen it in the men's tournament. We've seen it in the women's tournament. We've seen it with this team on both sides of the court, how valuable having this momentum in the late stretch of the season will be. And I think a big thing to note is the very last game of the season at home against a ranked Kentucky. You get that win and you get a full run in the SEC tournament, that's huge for your momentum heading into the NCAA tournament, especially if you can get some redemption on Texas. Again, still if, we're a few days away from either of those tournaments, so we'll see what happens, but right now, I think the Gamecocks are really in a very good spot. So, 2 points for Zander, 1 for Austin. We'll move on to our final topic here on the other side of the court. War is over for Gamecock men's basketball. The Gamecocks finally snapped their losing streak against Texas last weekend, improving their conference record to 1-13. Despite this, they are still slated to finish at the bottom of the conference, and unless a magical SEC tournament run happens, will not make the NCAA tournament. While any more wins seem unlikely for men's basketball this season, now may be the time to look towards the future of the program. They currently have the 26th ranked recruiting class according to 24/7 Sports, and the 8th highest class in the SEC. This class includes 3 three-star forwards alongside 4-star point guard Eli Ellis, who was the 67th ranked player in the nation. Despite this, SC will be losing a lot of talent and experience with the likely departure of Colin Murray-Boyles to the NBA. So, where do the Gamecocks go from here, and what does the future of the program look like? Zander, your thoughts?
I think that our strategy should be something similar to the early 2000s 76ers. We got to just trust the process. Even in you mentioned not even having a chance really to get into the NCAA tournament, but over the last 10 years, we've been over 508 of those seasons and only made it to the NCAA tournament twice, one being last year. So the last time, or excuse me, the first time we saw a drop in performance like this was in the 2022-2023 season. We saw that last season, the season after that very season, we were able to make the tournament. So, I mean, we've got to trust the development of our guys, and with this new era of college sports and NIL and transfer portal, it's going to be hard to bring in guys, and we've done a good job of bringing in some guys. Eli Ellis has been written off his whole career. Now he's a 2-time OTE MVP. So you've got to trust the development of people like Cam Scott, Arden Conyers, and there's really nothing you can do until we have another magical season like we did last season, because it's going to be hard to recruit players if we're not winning games.
Y'all, the SEC, I don't know if y'all tuned into basketball this year, y'all know what y'all have seen. SEC is loaded with talent and effort. And when I see our team, I see effort. Absolutely, I see effort.
That's good.
I'm going to Publix tomorrow. I'm getting Publix brand cold cuts. I can make a real good sandwich out of that, but that sandwich isn't going to the NCAA tournament. It might win 5 conference games.
Depends on what else you put on there.
I put honey mustard, Duke's mayo, a little bit of tomato, a little bit of lettuce.
Double condiment.
Double condiment.
Welcome to our new food segment.
Yes. Back to the tangent. I could go to Publix, get myself some boar's head, prime cut roast beef. That might make the tournament. In all season, Lamont Paris has to go in either transfer portal. Yeah, transfer portal. That's the option. Yeah. Or he could go to Publix, get some roast beef, put some Dukes on it, and make a real good sandwich that can make the tournament. I'm hungry, y'all. I had Chipotle for lunch, and I haven't eaten since, so I got food on the brain.
Well, Publix and Chipotle better sponsor us after that. I've never heard someone talk so highly of Publix.
It was so poetic.
Yeah.
I've had a Publix sub sandwich every week for the past 5 years, Austin. I would die for that.
That's crazy. Y'all both said it. Transfer portal. I think you got to hit it. I mean, I mentioned it last week when we talked about the college football transfer portal. It's basically like free agency now. It's the same in the NBA, or excuse me, the NCAA basketball. It's same in any other sport, college sport now. So you just got to hit the transfer portal. If you can't get players here as recruits, it's really hard to do so when you only have one conference win. You have to get guys in the portal that can turn your team around quickly. I know you said trust the process. But we've been trusting the process for a long time, and we've only gotten 2 NCAA appearances to really show for it recently. Even if they're all seniors in the transfer portal, next year's recruiting class needs to know that you can win under Lamont Paris, because that will get them to trust the process that Lamont Paris puts for them. If they don't start right away, they know we've got a talented team and a talented coach that could lay the groundwork so that they continue to play on the right path and eventually win those games and eventually not have one SEC win. With Shane Beamer, going back to college football, he knows how to get recruits because he proves he can win big games. And he proves that he can be in contention for a lot of them. Lamont had that last year, but is falling short this year. So I think if he can turn it around quickly, people will start to trust the process more and start to gradually recruit or commit here more often.
But is that not like difficult to do, seeing the season that we just had, to get those players to try to
absolutely
try to push that momentum
Don't
forward?
go 1-13. That's what I'm saying. If you don't have to get the 3 5-star recruits.
Yeah.
Just get a couple guys, lay the groundwork, let them build up the program, and that will draw people in.
Are we expecting the Publix cold cut to turn into a boar's head?
Dude, I don't know what you're talking about. Don't shop at Publix that often.
We have a Food Line shopper, I guess.
Yes, guilty as charged.
Knew it. They got cold cuts at Food Line.
I mean,
you should know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I mean, seriously.
Well, despite all the sandwich talk, I think, George and Austin, you both really hit it on the head where you can't stay under the talent level that the SEC has. So you can't devote yourself to a very long build process and expect, especially in this sort of coaching landscape, we're seeing, coaches be around for 2 or 3 years and then immediately, get outed because they're not getting the results immediately, even though they may be in a longer type of development process. And while I think that's ultimately what South Carolina needs at this point, I feel like we're not in a position to have that happen with an SEC fan base and an SEC administrative office who wants results for these big sports especially. They want these results immediately. And so you do have to go out and you have to find the right pieces and you have to get them. You have to turn those Publix cold cuts into boar's heads, like George said. Mm-hmm. I get it. I love Publix. But you have to go out and fit the right pieces. So Zander, you just fell a little bit short on the trusting the process because it's tough to ask South Carolina fans to trust the process when they're going to CLA every weekend and seeing the results that this team has put up. And yes, Lamont had a magical year last year. Maybe it's a one-off. Maybe he just needs more time to develop his players. But at the end of the day, we're an SEC basketball program with SEC fans who want results right now. And so I feel like it's very important for Lamont Paris to try and go out and get the key pieces that can come in today and maybe help spur along the development process of the high school guys that you're getting, but still have the experience and talent to get things done right now. And so with that, Austin is winning this segment and is the winner this week. George, you're gonna get 1 point. And yeah, you guys just hit it on the head. We have to find the right pieces outside of high school. We have to hit that transfer portal hard and bring in talent to help foster the development of the guys we are getting in high school and provide success for this team right now.
Well, call me men's basketball. Well, see, I don't win very often, so I don't know what to say.
I'm not calling you that.
Call me men's basketball because I finally got one. That's what I was trying to say. I have to ask, is it really every week for 5 years?
Every week for 5 years. Chicken tenders, a little bit of lettuce, a little bit of tomato, mayo, dupes, or Publix brand. I could do either. Honey mustard. If you haven't had a pub sub, what you doing?
Yeah, what you doing?
Eat it on the beach with a drink, non-alcoholic, of course. Yeah, that's really the life. That's
So if we continue off these sandwich metaphors,
right?
So he's got the boar's head this week. You've got the pub sub.
I've got the pub sub.
I've got like an old sloppy Joe.
You got the flounder from Food Line.
Food Line flounder
sandwich. Yeah, I had that and I threw up. Let me know.
I won't try it then.
Good.
Well, George, thank you for coming on this week. We'll invite you back when we need some more food recommendations for what to get for the week, especially with Publix. I get the Publix hype, man. I had some Publix fried chicken on the way here. Ooh. That Publix fried chicken is heaven in a box.
My language.
It is heaven in a box. We'll be right back with more Gamecock Game Day right after this.
Welcome to Simply Sports, the show where we simplify the rules of sports so you can enjoy the game.
Get ready to meet the cast of Carolina Tonight. He's the above-average letterbox patron. It's Jamie Bass. She would rather be anywhere else. It's Chloe Brown. They come in to find no one at the surprise party. It's Harry Burgess. His OnlyFans is mostly clips from him on the show. It's Samuel Kander. She's been caught red-handed. It's Ishveen Gudral. He's slaying the house down. It's Will Gunter. She wants something that she wants. It's Liv Moody. He got kicked out of Harvard for anger issues. It's James Nolan. He completely blew this take. It's Tyler Perrone. He's verbally berating the customer service line. It's Billy Petty. He's wittily gwittying onto the stage. It's Jacob Perdue. She's here to tell you, beat it, nerd. It's Fiona Schreier. Often mistaken for someone more famous, it's Camden Speck. He can't find his locker on the first day. It's Asher Thompson. The person in the audition they didn't tell you about, it's Olivia Wamai. He procrastinated editing this video. It's Jonathan E.
Come watch Carolina Tonight in Russell Underground.
Welcome back, Gamecocks.
As the regular season comes to a close, here's what Gamecock Basketball has left. Men's basketball has 3 chances left to get their second SEC win of the season, the first of which will be this Saturday against the Razorbacks. And if you haven't got to see them in person, next Tuesday might be your last chance as they take on Georgia for their last home game of the season. And finally, they will finish out the regular season Saturday, March 8th in Tennessee.
Dawn Staley and the women's basketball team will travel to Oxford tomorrow to take on Ole Miss at 9. Their regular season will come to a close right here in Columbia on Sunday against number 15 Kentucky.
Start with men's basketball?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Arkansas is a sneaky good team, right on the edge of the tourney looking to get in. They've had some very close games against very good teams like we have. We were close against Auburn, Florida, all them. They were also within 5-10 points, striking distance, if you will. I think it'll be a really good matchup. Georgia's the same way. I think sneaky good team. They're 17-11. They just knocked off number 3 Florida last night. They'll be a tougher opponent, in my opinion. I hope I'm saying this right. Assad Newell? I apologize
Probably
if you're
Newell.
watching. Probably Newell.
Oh,
he's averaging
he's
15.4 points a game. He'll be a big threat to this Gamecocks defense, but as we saw with Trey Johnson in Texas, he put up 27, and we still found a way to win. So obviously going to be a lot harder against Georgia. Definitely going to be hard against Arkansas, but 2 pretty good matchups to get the regular season coming to a close.
Well, yeah, Arkansas, I think it's going to be a lot more difficult than what people are predicting right now. They say we have about a 40% chance to win. I don't necessarily think that's the case because Arkansas has really become a rejuvenated program now that they've got the head coach, John Calipari. They've got tons of talent that they brought over from Kentucky, like Abdou Tiero and Ivisic, the really tall guy who's a 5-star recruit. But they also have guys like Boogie Fland, the freshman, who's performed very well all season, and they've also got Janelle Davis, who was a big part of that FAU Final Four run a few years ago, if you remember. So I think that one's going to be difficult. They also just beat Missouri, so we lost to Missouri by 30.
Yep.
But going to Georgia, I think that one will also be very difficult because, like you said, they are coming off of that win against number 3 Florida. But also, it's now or never for Georgia. They're kind of on the bubble looking into the tournament, so they're going to be very motivated to go dancing. And I don't think we're a team that can necessarily stop them from doing so. And of course, Tennessee is just a great program in general. That's where we'll close out our season.
And Georgia's beaten some really good teams this year as well. So they've got an impressive resume that they're just looking to add the Gamecock W to it as well.
Yeah, so for a team like Tennessee who has a real shot at winning the SEC tournament, I doubt that they're going to fall to South Carolina right before that.
Yeah.
So it's a really difficult final stretch of games, but every game has been pretty difficult this season. I'm glad we got one against Texas because these next few, I haven't been optimistic about any of the SEC games thus far, but these ones have real implications for every team involved that's not us. So These are games that all of these teams are, I wouldn't say you're going to overlook because they're must win at this point in the season, but I think that they're going to come in looking to build momentum like our women's team is doing right now.
Speaking of the women's team, we have an 86% chance to beat the Rebels in Oxford. One last tune-up before, I say the real games start. We have that final regular season game here against Kentucky. I treat that as a tournament game. I mean, you're still going for that 1 seed that Ryan mentioned in around the Horseshoe, where it's a coin flip if they both win out. It's going to be interesting to see how strong they play these teams, because I think obviously there's no other statistic that we were talking about. There's no point differential or whatever. So I think they're going to run through the Rebels, and I think Kentucky's going to be a really fun game to watch here in CLA. This is a good opportunity for Dawn to get all the kinks out and work through anything that they need to work through just one final time before getting into tournament play. Currently second in the SEC standing, so looking for number 1.
So Ole Miss don't have very many notes for them because other than one good win against Kentucky this season, they haven't been very great. And with the way that the team is starting to look like their old selves, I don't think it's going to be very easy for Ole Miss to get anything done in this one. But going to Kentucky, who is number 15 as of right now, 4th in the SEC, is an incredible program. Even looking to the future, they've got 5 stars and people that are the top of their recruiting class committing to play for this Kentucky team. I think it'll be a lot closer than Gamecock fans want it to be, just because of the likes of Clara Strack, who is averaging 14.7 points and 9.3 rebounds as of right now. She's averaging a near double-double, and we know how this team has had struggles guarding bigs. So, and also Georgia Moore, who basically leads Kentucky in every statistic except for rebounding, has been having an incredible season. So. You mentioned it last week. You said, would maybe your thoughts on South Carolina maybe change if they did lose to Kentucky last game of the season? And that's what I have right here. I think that would probably be the panic button. Things would start to fall off right before the SEC tournament. I would become worried from my previously a little bit concerned. I think Kentucky is a great team, but I mean, we're a very talented team as well, and it just kind of depends on how we're able to defend.
Yeah, I think we just talked about it in around the Horseshoe as well. The momentum factor is real. I really believe in it. And, if they can get that win against Kentucky, they're going to be riding high on a 4-game win streak going into the tournament. They'll have a few cupcakes, little alley-oops there, if you will, in the first couple rounds of the SEC tourney. But, I mean, the SEC is really, really good. So they're going to get harder and harder. And then you may have 1 or 2 toss-ups in the NCAA tourney. But they're the 64 best teams in the country, so you really can't overlook them as well. So momentum from here on out is going to be really important. I'm excited to see how the rest of the season plays out.
Yeah, I'm really excited for the Kentucky game because it'll be a great way to test if the momentum that we are building and building off of those more poor performances with like I've been mentioning, rebounding, defensive effort. I think that'll be a real test of if we're up to the challenge going into the SEC tournament. So that will be a very good game and one that I'll be watching.
Yeah, I'm just glad we have the women's basketball to watch in March, because men's was fun last year, but it's not going to be as fun this year. So pulling for Dawn Staley and the Gamecocks.
But yeah, that about wraps up our show for tonight. Thank you for tuning in to Gamecock Game Day.
Be sure to follow us on Instagram, X, and YouTube at SGTV at USC. To keep up with all of our content, be sure to also visit us online at sgtv@usc.com. I'm Austin McConnell.
And I'm Zander Collins. From all of us here at SGTV, have a great night, Carolina. Forever to thee.